I want to talk to you a little bit today about thread painting. Now, I know a while ago when Faye asked how many duplicate, there were like 3 million hands went up. How many have done thread painting before? Oh, there's more than 2. Yes. yes. Thread paint is very, very simple. It's very easy to do. You only use a straight and zigzag stitch. You don't have to have any special kind of machine to do it at all. What I want to show you is I want to show you the 2 methods that I use. Now, one of the methods that I use, I work off the quilt. And the reason that I work off the quilt is because the design has a lot of density to it. Now, for me to be able to do this, little guys, I'm working with them off the quilt. In other words, I didn't thread paint them right on there because of the distortion issue. So what I have here is I have my drawing. I draw on here. Whatever it is, I'm getting ready to thread paint. When I first started this, I thought it was the sync system. Whatever I magically thought appeared down here. Well, so there's, they keep me straight here. But I found out very quickly that didn't work. If I drew it on there, I'm good to go. Now, this is water-soluble stabilizer. It's 4x dissolved. It's made by Superior Threads. In the center are 2 pieces of tulle, and on the back is another piece of water-soluble stabilizer. And what this does, the reason it needs to be water-soluble is so that when I'm done, all this is going to wash away. So once I'm done, I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to put it over here. Now, there are a few more steps involved in something like that. It just doesn't go from here to here quite so fast. But once I've finished, here's a little one right here. Once I'm finished with the design, and I've thread painted this little tree right here, and once I'm done with it, I'm going to check out and make sure the outside edges are nice and solid, because these are the outside edges that I've got to clean up. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it away to within about 1/2 inch of the design, and I'm going to run it under cold water, because when this stabilizer starts breaking down, it's a bit like rubber cement. And I want to wash all the goo. I'm going to get all the goo out of there. Once the goo is gone, I'm going to soak it in 1 part fabric softener and 4 parts water. And I'm going to soak it until all the stabilizer that's trapped inside this little tree is gone. Now, when it's all done and all the stabilizer is out, I'm going to let it air dry. Now, remember I said I have tools in the center of here? I've got to get rid of the tool too. You can cut it away, or you can buy a stencil cutter. Everybody know what a stencil cutter is? Something you cut stencils with. I have used a bazillion stencils in the last 12 years. I have never used it to cut stencils with. But it works great. You plug it in, it gets hot. And as you run the tip of that stencil cutter right around the outside edge of the design, let's go here with this one. 2 things happen. Number 1, the tool that was in here is going to melt. You know what happens to polyester when it gets hot? It's going to melt. But the really, really plus to this is as the heat goes past this polyester thread, because I'm using a 40-weight polyester thread, as the heat goes past here, it fuses the edge of the design, so I don't ever have to worry about it falling apart. It's like playing with paper dolls. It's just like playing with paper dolls. Now, when I'm ready to put these little guys on here, including the pumpkins, I don't know what all you can see on the screen, I'm going to make sure that it's quilted, the borders are on, the binding's on, the label is on. Everything is going to be done before I go to put these on. Then, once everything is done, everything is squared up, it's ready to go, then I'm going to use invisible thread. I use the monopoly by Superior, and whatever I have I've used to quilt it with, that's what I'm going to put in the bobbin, and I just lightly stitch them on. Very, very easy to do. But the best way to do it is wait until it's all quilted. Because if you put these on first and quilt to it, you keep bumping into them, which, trust me, drives you crazy. Then you have a silhouette on the back of whatever you couldn't quilt to, because I cannot quilt through him because you'll see the lines. So that's kind of like half of the equation. And I work off the quilt about 95% of the time, because I have a little more leeway that way. In other words, I can adjust them slightly on here because I've worked with them off the quilt. So I can make it look like I want it too. Now, there's going to be another time that the outside edges of those designs are too small for me to clean up. Can you see this little tree right here? Am I on? Okay. If you look at the outside edges right here, some of these are only 1 thread thick. There's absolutely no way I can cut this out, because if I take that stencil cutter past these threads that are 1 thread thick, it's going to dissolve and they're going to be gone. So any time that I have a a very fragile outside edge, I'm going to work with it this way. I still have my design drawn on a piece of water-soluble stabilizer. Now underneath here is my fabric, or my quilt top, whatever it is that I'm working with. And on the back, I also have two pieces of water-soluble stabilizer. Here again, I want all the stabilizer to be gone. Now I want you to notice too, I know it's hard to see under the camera, but I only use a 6-inch hoop. And the reason for that, when I first started thread painting, I went about the biggest hoop I could possibly fit underneath the head of that machine. My hoop was so big that it would hit the head of the machine. I couldn't even get to the center of the design. And the biggest problem is, the bigger the surface area in here, the more distortion you're going to have. The smaller the surface area, the less distortion you're going to have. You cannot completely get rid of distortion, so this helps to minimize the distortion problem. So I've got my drawing on top, I've got my fabric here, and again, I've got two pieces of water-soluble stabilizer. Now I'm going to work with this, and here again, I like to use a 40-weight thread because it's got some sheen to it. Most of you are used to working with a 50-weight cotton, and it's great for piecing. But for something like this, I like the sheen that I get off of the polyester thread. There is no light reflection off of a cotton thread. And also, too, when you go out to purchase your thread, and this is the thing that I struggled with the most when I first started, was I didn't know anything about thread. If you look on the side of the thread, there's a number. It'll go anywhere basically from 35 to 100. The lower that number, the thicker the thread, the higher the number, the thinner the thread. On the back side of these designs, when I'm thread painting, I use a 60-weight polyester thread. In other words, I'm using a much, much lighter thread. So these are the two methods that I use. When I'm done with this one, all I have to do is cut away the excess stabilizer and wash it away, and I'm done. So you don't have, there's kind of miss a step in here in the fact that you don't have to remove the tool. Now, one other thing that you can do, up until now everything's been drawn on a piece of stabilizer, but you can also go to your quilt store and buy fabric that looks something like this. This is a piece of fabric that I bought at a quilt store, and I stabilized it on the back, and I thread painted this little guy right here. So I'm not an artist by trade. I don't draw very well, and I don't paint very well either, so sometimes I have to get a little creative. This is one really good way to do it if you don't want to have to draw anything on there. The same thing with this, too, is this was a piece of fabric that I found that I really, really, really liked at a quilt store, and all I did is embellish it. This is called thread sketching. And I just sketched some of the lines that are on here. I had some of my students tell me one time, they said, I really like what you do, but it takes too long. I said, fine, then we'll just do some thread sketching. So this is a little thread sketch right here. So you don't have to fill everything. It doesn't all have to be bulletproof, like some of these designs are. You can just sketch a design on here. Also, too, when you're working with your thread, is the tree on there?
Yeah.
How much time do I have?
As much as you want.
5 minutes?
9 minutes.
Yoo-hoo! You can also use your thread and your width of your zigzag stitch. Remember I said earlier that you only use a straight or zigzag stitch. And you makes it a little easier if you can drop your feed dogs. But if you can't, you can still do this without having to drop your feed dogs. But you can also use color and the width of your stitch to create an illusion of depth. When I did this little tree right here, this dark green area right here, I wanted to give the illusion that that was the furthest point from you. So I used a very dark green, and of course a dark color is always going to recede. And I used a 2mm zigzag, a very, very small zigzag. When I got up here to the top, I wanted this part to come towards you because the tree would naturally be rounder. I wanted that part to come towards you. So I used a 4.5mm and a much, much lighter thread. Now when I finished, I looked at it and it looked too flat. The very first color that I put in here underneath this part right here was the dark green. The problem was, by the time I got these other 6 shades of green on there, I had totally obliterated any dark green that I had on there. But I need to bring your eye back into the quilt. So I used a zigzag stitch and I hopscotched some green sections on here until I gave it the illusion that you can now see into the tree. So you can use your thread colors as well as the width of your stitch in order to create an illusion. Also, too, one thing that when you're quilting a landscape quilt, one of the very first shows I ran, one of the judges said, your quilting lines are not evenly spaced. Well, when you're working with a landscape quilt, you cannot quilt it like you do a normal quilt. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this horizon is the furthest point away from me. So therefore, the distance between the lines, not the stitch length itself, but the distance between the lines need to be very, very close together. As this quilt comes towards me and it gets closer and closer, by the time I get to here, there's a much bigger distance between those lines. And those lines also help to give the illusion of depth and up closest, which is what you want when you're working with a landscape quilt. You don't want to just use color. Now, one of the questions I get asked most frequently is when you're working with a zigzag stitch, how do I know the width that I need to use? The bigger your surface area, in other words, if I've got a tree canopy that's this big, I can have my stitch much wider, say a 4.5. As I get into more detail, like I'm working on her skirt there, I'll be down to a 2 millimeters. I'm working on something that's very, very, very small. So I need to make sure that the width that I'm working with accommodates the design that I'm going to be doing. Now also too, one other thing, and this is kind of what my new book is about, is what the difference between a highlight and a shading on here. This is my new book that was published by AQS. It came out last June, I think. And I was really happy with it until I was trying to bring about 30 of them downstairs today, and I didn't realize words weighed quite that much. But it was really, really heavy. But I was really happy with the way this turned out. And this book kind of gets into a little bit, well, how do I make things look realistic? How do I choose the threads that I want? How do I make things look like I want them to be? And if you look right here, you're going to use your shading colors. Okay?